By far the biggest secret to fat loss is What's going on, you guys? So in this video, I wanted to go ahead and answer the questions you guys have asked me on Instagram. I typically don't do YouTube videos in this type of format, but I figured that this would be pretty fun to do because I haven't done anything like this before. Let's waste no time and get right into it. The first question that I was asked, and there's 8 total questions that I'm gonna go over. This is the top 8. What is my favorite song and who is my favorite artist? This is probably the hardest question for me to answer of them all. So I feel like this changes over time. Back in the early 2010s era, it was probably A$AP Rocky, which apparently none of you young kids know songs by A$AP Rocky nowadays. Like, huh? But I'd probably have to say, as of recently, I really like Kendrick Lamar. Now I know everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of his newest album. I like it, but I'd say I kind of like his old album, like the one right before this, a little bit better. But I think I'm gonna have to give it to my guy because he's not only a great mentor, his music just speaks volumes and it'll last for forever. And as he said, he's the Tupac of his generation. So Nipsey Hussle, I'd have to say, is my favorite artist. And my favorite Nipsey Hussle song, whew, now that's a real tough one. It depends on whatever mood I'm in, but I probably have to say I Don't Stress is my favorite Nipsey Hussle song. All right, next one. How do you gain muscle and lose fat at the same time? So back to my bread and butter. This is what I'm here to answer. So this is called recompositioning. And basically when you're in a caloric deficit or you're brand new to training, if you haven't been training for a very long time, maybe you've been injured, it's a little bit easier to gain a little bit more muscle mass while losing weight. Also, if you are obese and you're coming down in weight, because training might be something new to you or something that you may have not done in a long period of time, it might be easier to gain some muscle mass while you lose weight. My best recommendation would be to not actually go for specifically recomping. I would advise that you go for being in a caloric deficit and try to maintain as much muscle mass that you can. And if you do build some muscle while you're in a caloric deficit, then that's even better. One thing that you can try to do to help build some muscle while you're in a deficit is to have a rather higher carbohydrate intake rather than a higher fat intake. And of course, you want to make sure your protein is equated. Overall, you just need to make sure your calories are less than what you're actually putting out as far as energy goes. Carbohydrates actually fill your muscles with sugar in the form of glucose. That's gonna be very crucial in giving you energy and in assisting the proteins in rebuilding more muscle. Good rule of thumb for protein, 1 gram per pound of body weight if you're on the leaner side, or you could do 1 gram per pound of lean mass if you are a little bit more on the heavier side. And the way you figure out your lean mass, just try to take your body fat percentage roughly and subtract that from your overall body weight. You'll get your rough lean mass. Next one, what are the last 2 books that I've read recently? Recently read books would definitely have to be the Bible. I'm Christian, so I have been reading the New Testament. I really enjoy it. I've been in the book of Matthew for a decent amount of time. And before this, I read another book, read a Nipsey Hussle book. So I've read a lot of books recently, but in particular, one that stands out to me was actually a Nipsey Hussle recommendation. And it's a book called The Way of the Superior Man. Now, this is definitely a different kind of book. It deals with success, it deals with relationships, so very interesting stuff. Definitely have to have an open mind if you read it. It's, again, not something that I thought I would typically read, but it was really, really good. All right, on to the next question. Macros, how do you work them out? And how much should you be consuming? You have to first and foremost figure out how many calories you are eating. And from there, you want to adjust these levels. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can use a calorie estimator. There are tons of websites out there that will estimate how many calories you should be consuming based upon your height, your weight, and your age. Or you can actually track your food on a tracking app like MyFitnessPal or MyMacRos Plus. And you can do that for an entire week or 2 to get a rough estimate of how many calories you're eating. And then from there, you can start to adjust your macros. Depending on your goals, are gonna really determine your macros. Some people favor a slightly more ketogenic style diet, so maybe upwards of 50% of their total calories are coming from dietary fat. Some people favor more of a lower fat diet, higher carbohydrate diet that might be more beneficial if you're lifting weights more often. If you're doing a more high-fat ketogenic style diet, this is going to be more modified ketogenic, because technically real keto has pretty low protein. I'd say about, again, 50%, maybe a little bit more of your calories, maybe even 60%, can come from dietary fats. And then you're going to have roughly somewhere between 25 to 45% of your diet coming from protein, and then the rest is going to be carbohydrates. If you're doing the opposite and doing more of a higher carbohydrate style diet, you're going to focus on somewhere between 25 to 35% of your diet coming from dietary fats. Then same thing with the proteins, about 25 to 45% coming from protein, and then again, the rest filled with carbohydrates. Thing is, there's not necessarily a secret to macros, but when you have a coach working with you, it's just someone as your third eye, choosing the time frames that you're going to actually make adjustments, because a lot of times we can think that we see progress and make an adjustment too soon, or we might not adjust soon enough. So that's my best recommendation. If you're trying it on your own, the process can be tedious at times, and then other times it can be pretty relaxing. It just depends on, again, what your ultimate goals are. On to the next one. Training with an injury, in particular a shoulder injury. Now this one's pretty interesting. I've done this numerous amounts of times. Growing up being a gymnast, I have injured my pec minor. I had a little bit of labrum stuff, rotator cuff issues. My best recommendation would be something that my coach in gymnastics actually taught me. He told me if my pain level was anything above a 3 out of 10, and you have to be really honest with yourself. If your pain level on any exercise is above a 3 out of 10, I never would touch that exercise. So I still follow that same rule of thumb now. If I can manage between a 1 to a 3 or 0 to a 3 pain level on an exercise, it's generally okay. And I try to be even more educated. If it's closer to a 3, I would definitely not try to push the weight on anything or try to push the repetitions. I would just try to make sure I feel the movement, if that's a movement that I know I need to complete. If you don't have to do exercises that you need for a program, like I said, going between 1 to 3 or just straight up avoiding it would probably be best in order to let your shoulder heal. You could do a lot of prehabilitation exercises. So these are going to be things like external rotation, things like foam rolling, things like isolation exercises or isometric exercises where you're holding positions that will hopefully strengthen the muscles around the rotator cuff. Depends on where it is in your shoulder, where you actually have your injury, is going to determine how you should ultimately approach it. The next one, third to last, we're getting there. For better fat loss, should you do carb cycling? Now, this is another great one. Carb cycling can be good for some individuals, and it could not be. Carb cycling, essentially, if you're not familiar, is having days where your carbs are higher and days where your carbs are lower. Or this could even be throughout the day, times where your carbs are higher and times where they're lower. Overall, your calories are going to be king. So depending on how many calories you're eating in a day, is going to determine whether you are losing fat or not. If you know that you favor having more carbohydrates around your training time, which means around the time that you exercise, then maybe consider carb cycling so that you can have more energy during that time and maybe consume less carbohydrates outside of those windows. Maybe if you feel like you're not as in control of your calories as you want to be and you have more impulsive decisions, then yeah, carb cycling might be good. If you feel like you have a pretty decent control over all of those things, I'd say it's up to you. If you want to experiment with it and see if you like it, great, but otherwise, there's no necessary benefit to more carb cycling versus not. Again, calories are going to be king, and then where you're getting those calories from as far as food sources are going to matter, in addition to the macronutrient breakdown. So that would be my answer for that. Okay, second to last question. So how long do I work out per day? Generally speaking, I work out on average somewhere between an hour and a half to about 2 hours per day. And this isn't totally intentional. A lot of times when I'm working out, I'm actually filming a lot of my workouts in order to make more content. So I'd say if I weren't actually filming, I'd probably typically lift for about an hour to an hour and 30 minutes. I usually like filming content when I work out, so I don't have to go back and film more content when I'm already fatigued and add to my overall volume of workout. And to be honest, I like coming home and spending time with my family. My daughter's growing up and she's just getting older and older by the day. So it's just really fun to see her starting to speak and, wanting to play. So I don't really like being at the gym crazy long, and I like making sure that I go on a walk with my family just because it's what I love to do. So yeah, I try not to make the gym my life. I try to make it a part of my life, and a significant part, but nonetheless not my entire life. Alrighty, final question. And this one is a sweet one. If you want to start with calisthenics, where do you actually start? My opinion is that you want to start with learning the handstand first. I think the handstand is the most fundamental movement that you can learn in all of calisthenics, and in particular, I think it's the most fundamental movement that you can learn in all of gymnastics, which I think calisthenics is more so just the strength aspect of gymnastics. Yes, it's body weight exercises, but most of gymnastics is body weight exercise. If you learn a handstand, it'll translate to tons of things. Even your pull-ups, your dips, your front levers, all those things that you can learn from doing and perfecting a handstand, you can use in these other skills. You'll have better body control. You'll be able to position yourself in ways that you maybe didn't think you could position yourself in, because you've built that stability from knowing how you should feel upside down, then you know how you should feel right side up, and so forth. So the handstand to me is the most fundamental movement that you should learn in calisthenics. Now, personally, I don't do calisthenics as much as I used to. I do pull-ups, push-ups, things like that. But yeah, I gotta get back in the gym and, have a little fun with flipping around. It's been probably a few years now since I've actually done a little bit of somersaults. I was a gymnast at the Ohio State University, and for about 18 total years. So some of you guys don't know that. It was a very, very large part of my life. So anyways, that's going to wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and like it. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you go ahead and do so. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.